I'm Laura Richardson with Relevate, and we're bringing you another episode of I'm Moving to North Carolina Now What? So, one of the things that catches people off guard is closing day not going as planned. So, I often hear from buyers, wait, what do you mean? Closing day may not happen on closing day. And yes, there's lots of stuff that can actually go sideways, awry, not go as according to plan on closing day. So, first of all, let's just talk about what's supposed to happen prior to closing day. Well, you should always change the utilities because remember, you're now going to have to be footing that bill. Change them into your name probably at least the week prior to closing. The seller is obligated to keep them on through closing day, and then obviously you take over the next day. So if closing day were to, let's say, get delayed, that transference can actually update and change. So something else that's important is to wire your funds. Try not to do this at the last minute. Every banking institution is different on the max they'll allow to be transferred, the manner. Sometimes they can get locked up and not get there for a few days, which again can cause some delays. You'll also go to your final walkthrough. Remember, the final walkthrough should be done the day of closing, if at all possible, no later, I would say, or earlier than the day before. You're trying to verify if any of the repairs that were required to be done have been done with efficacy and that everything's still in the same condition it was in when you went under contract. Then you're going to go to the attorney's office. You're going to sign everything in triplicate. So bring your good pen, and you want to make sure you bring 2 forms of identification with you as well as your checkbook. For you young people, basically when you're trying to write money to other folks, there's these personal checks that your bank gives you with your account. That's what I'm talking about. See if you have one of those and bring it with you to closing, because sometimes the numbers can shift at the last minute and you're actually not allowed to wire funds if it's under $1,000, which inevitably that's what it will be. And then you're going to wait for the deed to record. Now, guys, until the deed records, you cannot get into the house. The house is not yours. The deed transference is what makes the home yours. So it transfers into your name. Usually it only takes a few hours. So again, be mindful of what time of day you're shooting to close. Those afternoon closings, that's where sometimes stuff can happen. So now let's talk about what can derail this process. That's like your typical closing day scenario. Well, one is financing issues. This is why it's so important to vet your lender and to make sure that they're aware of all the stipulations of the type of loan you're using. And you need to wire your own funds. These should be encrypted instructions coming from the closing attorney. So do this in advance and make sure it's the proper amount. Another thing is that the title search. So looking at that deed history, all of a sudden uncover something that nobody knew about. For example, there could be deed history problems, like there's an extra person that exists on the deed that nobody knew about. The type of deed doesn't make sense, or there was an error in the spelling. We've even seen where it references the wrong plat book. So what that means is that in the deed, it will say, this is the area that's being transferred from owner to owner. Well, they reference a book of maps that is registered with the Register of Deeds. And if that plat map that's being referenced is wrong, it's basically like the wrong property kind of changed hands. So that could be something that happens. Sometimes we also see that paperwork hasn't been signed correctly. So this could be contract documents that's missing certain initials, or things that should have been finalized and stuff haven't been. So you always want to make sure that all of the paperwork has had the T's crossed, the I's dotted. And then we get to the final walkthrough. The final walkthrough is kind of like the 11th hour scenario. So this is where a lot of stuff can go sideways. We've had everything from movers drop kicking a gun safe down a flight of hardwood stairs to all of a sudden the HVAC that was working dies, water heaters explode. A recent one was that somebody took out a mailbox, like a rogue driver just ran it over and it was laying in the next neighbor's yard. All of these things mean that the property has now changed condition since when we went under contract to when we're about to close. So one of the big questions is, well, who's responsible for fixing these things? It's the current owner of the house, meaning the seller. And sometimes that can get a little complicated. Sometimes it's stuff that the seller didn't necessarily do that damages the property, but they didn't remove things as well. So this could be junk that's left behind. Sellers are really good at convincing themselves that the next buyer needs the leftover flooring that doesn't even exist in the house, or all of their half-used cleaning product supplies and stuff like that. just remember the buyer is not the junkyard. They don't want to have to get rid of all these things. And some municipalities also require extra heavy pickups at a cost, like Holly Springs is definitely one of them. So keep in mind, guys, your final walkthrough is like your proving ground. You're trying to make sure everything is still good to go. And if it's not, you can contractually come to an agreement on how we're going to fix these things. Another thing is that sometimes there's certain documents that all of a sudden come out of left field and get finalized, like a survey. And on that survey, we can all of a sudden realize that there's an encroachment on the property. That is new information that's coming to light that the buyer now has to decide how they want to deal with. So this is another one in addition to a builder just refusing to sign certain paperwork. We've run into scenarios before where certain documents, some that are very taxing and very lengthy to fill out, but they are required per the type of loan that the buyer is using. And certain builders sometimes don't feel like they legally want to sign those things. And because of that, that can also kind of rub each other and cause conflict. Or we could have somebody that's involved in the contract go MIA, stop responding, stop, sending back documents that need to be signed for closing. So it's always good to make sure that everybody's bought in and on board with how the contract is written. And then the last one, and there's actually a clause in the contract that now covers this, is an act of God happening, meaning like a tree comes out of left field and falls on the house. Or let's say like what happened out in the western part of Carolina where Hurricane Helene hit and houses were completely demolished. Now there is a clause in our contract that basically says if an act of God were to occur, the buyer and seller can decide, do they want to allow time or insurance to kind of step in and resolve the issue, and they can stay in contract, or both parties can part ways and void the contract. So just keep in mind, closing day is set to be one of the exciting days. It's the finale, the finish of this entire timeline. But nothing is said and done until it is completely filed with the Register of Deeds. So just keep in mind, guys, there's a lot of give and take, and you got to be patient and just know that in your excitement, be prepared for stuff to kind of come out and have to be settled. All right, I'm Laura Richardson with Relevate, and we'll see you on our next episode.